Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your Tuesday with us. We're going to get started with the arrest of 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, who has now been charged in the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
Overnight, New York prosecutors charged him with 1 count of murder, 3 counts of criminal possession of a weapon, and 1 count of possession of a forged instrument. Mangione was arrested by police in Pennsylvania Monday after he was identified at a McDonald's. He was initially arrested on gun, forgery, and other charges in Pennsylvania before he was charged with murder in New York. Now, officials say he had a homemade weapon called a ghost gun, similar to the weapon used in last week's shooting. Ghost guns are firearms that can be built at home with parts bought online. They don't require a background check or have serial numbers. A lot to cover. Retired ATF Special Agent in Charge Jim Kavanaugh is here to break down the investigation for us. But let's begin with NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach, who is in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where Mangione was taken into custody. Gary, good morning. Just walk us through how police were able to ID the suspect and ultimately arrest him after he spent several days on the run.
Hey, good morning, Joe. After 5 days of investigators using every tool and technology in their toolbox, they all came down to good old-fashioned see something, say something. That's exactly what happened here inside this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A patron of the McDonald's saw somebody acting a little suspicious in the corner. He alerted an employee of the McDonald's, and that employee of the McDonald's recognized the suspect from the photos that had been circulated over the past week, and that employee called law enforcement. When law enforcement showed up, they immediately knew that was the guy that everyone had been looking for this week. In the conversations with this suspect at the McDonald's, law enforcement says he became agitated once they started asking him questions about whether he'd recently traveled to New York. So certainly they knew they had their man, and they went from there in the process. Joe?
What else do we know about Mangione, his arrest, and anything here about a possible motive?
Yeah, Mangione is not your typical criminal. He's a highly educated guy. He graduated from University of Pennsylvania. He went to a private all-boys high school in Baltimore, $40,000 a year. His parents seem to be having well-off jobs as well. So that does not fit your typical description of somebody who perhaps would shoot a healthcare executive. There were, however, items that were found with him at the McDonald's that do lead to perhaps the motive or the motivation behind this crime. He had 3 different writings with him, and on 3 different pages, I want to read part of it to you. It says, quote, "Frankly, these parasites had it coming," and, quote, "I do apologize for any strife or trauma, but it had to be done," according to a senior law enforcement official briefed on this investigation. Certainly, that is a clue for investigators as they move forward in this process as to the motive behind the shooting.
So, Gary, he's facing charges in Pennsylvania and New York. So explain what's next when it comes to this legal process and just the investigation in general.
Yes, state and potentially federal charges here in Pennsylvania, and then federal charges over in New York potentially as well. And so he's here. He spent the night here at a state correctional facility about 40 minutes outside Altoona. So they will have to extradite him from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to New York. We expect that to happen sometime this week, and then legal proceedings will move from there. But we do expect him to be behind bars for the foreseeable future. He was denied bail at his initial hearing earlier last night. Joe and Savannah?
Gary Grumbach in Altoona. Gary, thank you.
Let's now bring in NBC News law enforcement analyst Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, thanks always for your time. So with everything that we've learned about Mangione and the investigation in just the last 24 hours since we were talking with you yesterday morning, what stands out to you as the most significant?
Well, Mangione didn't know the old Chinese proverb, Savannah, when you set out on a journey for revenge, first dig 2 graves. And it looks like his efforts might have been, to a broader effort, and maybe not just Mr. Thompson. We'll have to see what his writings turn up in furtherance of the investigation as they find out more. But as you remember, when we talked the next morning after the killing, we discussed, this may not be, everyone says a targeted killing. It is, but is it just the first one in what's to come? We didn't know. What they found when they arrested him, he's still carrying a murder weapon and a silencer. That's a big rig. Why didn't he ditch that? If this was the only goal to kill Mr. Thompson, why didn't he ditch that? Because that's, when it's on him, it's clear evidence of guilt. I mean, he has the murder weapon on him, plus the fake ID that was used, and he looks like the killer. I mean, So it goes to make me believe that this was maybe his first in a campaign he believed. Also, when he's, reading about Ted Kaczynski and quoting Ted Kaczynski, I was one of the original case agents on a Unabomber bomber, and I worked on that case on and off for 17 years. And he was against society and industrialized society and, launched out broadly. So that's a great bit of police work because this guy's been stopped. Nobody's been killed that we know of between his killing of Mr. Thompson and his apprehension. So I think as the days and evidence unfold, we may find out that, we stopped a broader effort of murder with this guy.
We'll find out, Jim. Let's talk about the manhunt. It took almost a week for police to locate Mangione. He was found just 5 hours away from New York, basically hiding in plain sight. What do you make of that?
Well, really, it's 5 days is a real short time frame. Like I said, Unabomber, we had him 17 years. I've chased bombers for years, killers. On the DC Sniper, it took us a month to catch those guys. I mean, that was, with murders happening all the time. These killers can run, they can continue murdering. So 5 days, that's great. That's record time. I mean, really, unless he's caught, at the scene or fleeing the scene, 5 days is absolutely great police work. I mean, the NYPD detectives and their commanders should be commended. What a great job. And putting it out in the public. The public, the people in the McDonald's, the customer, this employee, thank you so much for doing this and helping keep America safe. And Altoona PD, great job, young officer who also recognized the killer's face. So the media plays a role. So together, police, media, citizens captured this guy to stop more killing. And so that's the good news.
It seems like one of the very first high-profile cases that's making these headlines that it has that involves a ghost gun. So that's a weapon that really, for all intents and purposes, is untraceable. You kind of get parts, make it at home, doesn't have that serial number. Does that impact the ability to use ballistics in some way to tie the gun to the crime? Obviously, we're working with a lot of other evidence here, circumstantial and otherwise. But what does that mean in terms of the testing that a weapon would typically undergo?
It won't affect the testing very much. What it affects is the tracing, our ability to trace the gun, the ownership. But now we've caught him red-handed with the gun, so we know it's his gun. The firearms identification at the forensic laboratory will be matching the barrel, which is a metal barrel inside the gun, with the lands and grooves in the barrel to the cartridge and the projectile used in the crime. So when the projectile is ejected and kicked on the street, there's marks, extractor marks on that brass shell, and they'll be able to match those to the gun and also the firing pin, which is metal, even in a ghost gun, and it's going to hit the primer and it's going to leave a mark. So they'll be able to match the casings, the empty casings, and the bullets at the scene to the gun, even though it's a ghost gun.
Jim Kavanaugh, thank you as always.
Turning now to the Middle East, Israel has been condemned for seizing a buffer zone in Syria following the collapse of the Syrian government and its authoritarian leader, Bashar al-Assad. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims it's necessary to protect his country's security.
Yes, several Arab nations are accusing Israel of violating international law after the Israeli military sent ground forces into the UN-monitored demilitarized area. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also says that Israeli tanks were spotted southwest of the capital of Damascus, which the IDF denies. The monitoring group also says the Israeli military has carried out more than 300 airstrikes on targets across Syria since Sunday, hitting ports, airports, and other military infrastructure.
NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, I know you're outside of the courthouse where Netanyahu is testifying in his criminal corruption trial. We'll discuss that with you in the next hour. But for now, what more can you tell us about these strikes, these reports of Israeli ground troops inside Syria?
So, Joe, Savannah, very widespread Israeli strikes all across Syria since the weekend. And as you said, Israel's government is saying the goal of these strikes is to destroy strategic weapons left behind by the Assad regime that could fall into the hands of extremists inside of Syria. They are especially concerned about Assad's stockpiles of biological and chemical weapons, as well as ballistic missiles. But given the scale of these strikes, it does appear that Israel is effectively trying to demilitarize Syria, to destroy all of the major military assets of the Assad regime so that none of them end up in the hands of the rebels. In terms of what's going on the ground, Israel has sent troops first into what was a buffer zone in between Israeli and Syrian positions, and they have now acknowledged they have crossed over that buffer zone, and they are a little further into Syrian territory. It does not appear accurate that they are advancing towards Damascus, but they are inside of what the world acknowledges is sovereign Syrian territory. The UN is saying that Israel has breached an agreement from back in 1974 by doing this. Israel is pointing out that agreement was with the Assad regime, and that regime has collapsed. Guys.
We're also, of course, watching these next steps as we're discussing in Syria following the downfall of Assad. We saw the main rebel commander meet with Syria's prime minister to discuss a transition. What is the latest there?
So these rebels are trying to convert their lightning-fast battlefield victory into a new political authority, Savannah, and they are trying to form a government now. They have appointed an interim prime minister. He is an Islamist who is in charge of the authority up in the northwest of Syria, where rebels have been in control for several years now. And there are big questions about what kind of government is going to emerge from this revolutionary chaos. The main rebel group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Islamist, has its origins in al-Qaeda, but has really been trying to telegraph moderation, saying it is not a threat to minorities, it is not a threat to women. But the whole world is watching to see what kind of policies this rebel Islamist government will put in place as it takes power. Guys.
All right, Raf Sanchez. Raf, thanks for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Well, one Texas family is watching this situation in Syria very closely because their son, Austin Tice, has been held there for over a decade. NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt spoke with Tice's parents.
With the overthrow of the Syrian government, a Texas family has renewed hopes of bringing their son home. Journalist Austin Tice has been held in Syria for 12 years. His parents have never given up hope and told me there is recent evidence that Austin is alive.
We have not received a proof of life. We have absolutely verifiable intel that he is.
Mark and Deborah Tice say their confidence is boosted by unspecified information they've received from the region.
We did hear that he's doing well whenever we had this information, that he is safe, he is well.
President Biden agrees that Tice is alive and over the weekend said he thinks the U.S. can get him back. The family's request to the president?
We would ask the same thing of them as we are of the new authorities in Damascus, and that is please do everything you can to keep Austin safe until he's in our arms, until he's home with us.
Austin Tice went missing on a reporting assignment in Syria in August 2012. The last sighting, this brief video surfacing about a month later. Alive, but appearing to be held captive by unknown parties. Mark, we've spoken before, and there have been some ups and some downs, as you can certainly testify to. Does this feel different somehow?
It does feel different.
It definitely feels different.
It very much feels different. In chaos, there's opportunity. This is an opportunity, and it feels stronger than any that we've seen or felt in a long time.
What do you think stands in the way of his freedom?
I can't imagine that anything stands in the way of his freedom. You know, it'll just be a matter of who finds him and how they choose to release him. But I do believe that he will be found.
Our thanks to Lester Holt for that report. Well, a U.S. official has told NBC News that the U.S. envoy for hostage affairs has traveled to Beirut as part of the effort to bring Tice home.
Now to the latest on the Trump transition. Embattled Defense Secretary pick Pete Hegseth returns to Capitol Hill today for more meetings with skeptical senators. He's trying to shore up support amid troubling allegations about his personal life. Last night, Hegseth walked back comments he previously made about women serving in the military on Fox News. Said he looks forward to an FBI background check.
I also want an opportunity here to clarify comments that have been misconstrued that I somehow don't support women in the military. Some of our greatest warriors, our best warriors out there are women. I'm not presuming anything, but after President Trump asked me to be his Secretary of Defense, should I get the opportunity to do that, I look forward to being a secretary for all our warriors. I look forward to the FBI background check. I look forward to the actual under oath conversations with senators as we go through the process.
President-elect Trump's choice for intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, also making the rounds on Capitol Hill this week. She'll undoubtedly face questions over a 2017 visit to Syria. At the time, she said the now-deposed dictator, Bashar al-Assad, was not an enemy of the U.S.
NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns joins us with the latest on the transition. Dasha, good morning. Let's start with Pete Hegseth. Seems like some of the senators once thought to be potential roadblocks to his confirmation might be warming up to him. So how are those meetings going with who's on tap to meet with today?
Hey, Joe, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, look, as recently as last week, it looked like this confirmation might be dead in the water, but things may be turning around. It's been an all-out push for Hegseth. He's been talking to folks on the Hill. He's been on air as you played there, and he's been fully campaigning with the support of President-elect Trump. He has met with specifically the biggest skeptic here is Senator Joni Ernst. She herself is the first female combat veteran to serve in Congress, and she herself is a sexual assault survivor. So she was skeptical given that he has made comments about women in combat and that given that he has faced sexual assault allegations. But she signaled yesterday that she might have the door open to supporting him. She said that the meetings were encouraging and that she's going to support him through this process, Joe, Savannah.
Let's also talk, Dasha, about Tulsi Gabbard. So yesterday, hundreds of conservative veterans signed a letter endorsing her anticipated nomination for intelligence chief. But these visits to Capitol Hill, we just mentioned this, they're kind of coming at an awkward time. Talk about why some of her views on Syria and Russia are under scrutiny, the intersection of the timing of world events right now, how she's handling questions about all that.
Yeah, so you've got that endorsement letter. Then you have another letter signed by 100 diplomats and security officials saying that she shouldn't be confirmed because of some of her past views and actions. Look, one of the biggest roadblocks here is that trip you mentioned earlier, Savannah, to Syria back in 2017. She met with Bashar al-Assad and defended him at a moment when he was being accused of using chemical weapons against his own people. That is something that both Republicans and Democrats have been concerned about. In fact, NBC News reporting about a 2018 hearing in Congress when a Syrian defector was set to testify in a closed-door hearing of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And both Democrats and Republicans were concerned about then Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard being present for that hearing and potentially leaking information. She's also been accused of parroting Russian propaganda. So she might have an uphill climb here, but she's defending her positions and defending her stance in support of President-elect Trump. Take a listen.
I want to address the issue that's in the headlines right now. I stand in full support and wholeheartedly agree with the statements that President Trump has made over these last few days with regards to the developments in Syria.
There's been a lot of distraction with first Matt Gaetz, now Pete Hegseth, but Gabbard's nomination is certainly going to be an uphill climb, guys.
And Dasha, the names keep coming. We're learning more about some other potential nominees Mr. Trump's putting forward. Real quick, what names stand out to you?
Well, number one is right now Caleb Viteo, who's going to lead ICE. He is someone that grew up in immigrations and customs and border patrol. He really understands this issue. He is somebody who can hit the ground running and trying to implement the president-elect's agenda of mass deportations and shutting down the border. This is someone that actually does have decades of experience with the agency that he is set to lead, unlike some of the other choices that we've talked about here, guys.
All right, Dasha Burns, thank you so much.
Well, wildfire sparked overnight in Southern California called the Franklin Fire is threatening homes in Malibu Canyon near Pepperdine University. You are looking at an aerial view of those flames right now.
Firefighters say it is growing with fierce speed as it is consuming hundreds of acres, fueled by gusty winds. So far, students at the university have been ordered to shelter in place. Most of the eastern half of Malibu has been ordered to evacuate. Meteorologist Angie Lassman has the latest on that and much more with our forecast. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Unfortunately, the conditions across that region don't look to improve here anytime soon. Here's what we've got going on. We've got this high pressure in place across parts of the Great Basin. That does a couple of things for us. It basically ushers in this really dry desert air towards the coast. Unfortunately, we see as it moves down those hills that the air gets even drier. So we've got relative humidity values dropping 5 to 10% through the day today. This is, of course, not what you want to see. This is kind of the conditions that are prime for these fires to start and continue spreading. On top of that, we're really running at a deficit across this region when it comes to rainfall. So since October 1st, rainfall less than 20% of normal for most of Southern California. You can see Los Angeles just over 1/10 of an inch since October 1st. So we really could use some rain across this region, and it doesn't look like we have a whole lot of that in sight for the short term. Here's the alerts that are up right now, 12 million at risk. Those are going to stay in place at least through tomorrow. We'll see the potential for 50 to even up to 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts possible. So again, along with the dry air and the dry conditions, we've also got those really strong winds. So no surprise that we've got this fire weather threat across a good chunk of that area. Especially take note of the extreme risk area. So Pasadena, Santa Clarita included in that. But again, Los Angeles stretching down to Ramona and San Diego, all included in this. With those wind gusts, of course, we will have the risk of down trees and down power lines. So we'll see that be a potential issue today as well. Meanwhile, out east, a different story. We're gearing up for a whole lot of rain, and it is much needed rain across this region too. Today, it's focused across the southeast. We've got a system that's going to push all of that moisture up into the northeast here as we get specifically into the overnight hours and early hours tomorrow. That's when we'll really see our rain ramp up for the northeast. But folks across parts of the east central Gulf, that's where we'll see the potential for the flood risk, potentially strong storms as well. And then here comes the rain for folks from Washington, D.C. to New York and up into Boston. We'll see a good drenching rain, again, much needed after the really dry kind of fall that we had, but not all at once, because, of course, that presents those flooding concerns. Behind the system, that kicks out, but cooler air filters in, and that means more lake effect snow. We're going to see that be a potential issue for folks across the Great Lakes region, the snow belt picking up the potential of maybe half a foot or over a foot or even 1.5 feet in some locations. So those winter alerts are up for 7 million people right now, guys. The rainfall amounts coming in 3, maybe 4 inches of rain. And again, umbrella handy tomorrow across this region, but the flooding concern will also be there. So careful on the roadways.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.